honeybee. Small but influential. They play a vital role in nature and are important actors within food production. But how do they operate inside the hive? This is life in a hive. The queen, marked in red, is at the heart of the entire hive. She is the mother of all bees and is larger than the rest of the hive. Her presence is the center of life in the hive. By continuously spreading her pheromones, she gives clear instructions to the worker bees. Her invisible messengers are the communication network of the bee colony. Every bee in the colony knows what to do. Her other central role is to lay the eggs. The queen leaves the hive for her wedding dance. There, she collects the necessary genetic material that she will use for the rest of her life. Using a process called haplodiploidy, the queen can also determine the sex of the offspring. If she fertilizes an egg, it has diploid genes and thus becomes a female worker. If she doesn't fertilize an egg, it becomes haploid and thus a male bee called a drone. The queen is always surrounded by workers who take care of her. They clean and feed her while she lays eggs. Every day the queen searches for the cleanest and best prepared combs to lay her eggs. Towards the end of her approximately 5-year lifespan, her strength diminishes, and with it the strength of her pheromones. The workers recognize this sign. They select a young larva and begin to feed it with the hive's most valuable food, royal jelly. The next queen of the colony is found in this large cell. A bee's journey begins with a single egg, which is laid by the queen inside a honeycomb. After 3 days, a white larva hatches from it. For the first days of its life, the larva is fed the rich royal jelly by young worker bees known as nurse bees. After that, most larvae are switched to a diet of bee bread, a mixture from pollen and honey, which provides them with the nutrients they need to grow. Around the 9th day of its life, nurse bees seal the cell with a thin layer of wax, and inside, the larva undergoes the pupal stage where it transforms. Over the next 12 days, the larva's body undergoes a complete metamorphosis, developing wings, legs, compound eyes, and other characteristics of an adult bee. With its new body, the bee uses its mandibles to break through the wax layer and free itself from the cell. This entire process from egg to worker bee only takes 21 days and is the life cycle that keeps the colony alive. In the case of an absent queen, there is a slight chance that a worker bee will start laying eggs. These won't be fertilized and thus grow into larger male drone bees. They serve no other purpose than breeding and consuming food, hence once the weather starts to cool, these bees are exiled from the hive and left to die. About 10 days after hatching, worker bees begin to produce wax from special glands on their abdomen. These wax plates are small and thin, but when chewed and molded, they form the building pieces for the hive's honeycombs. Together, the bees build strong cells which are efficient for storing the hive's honey, pollen, and eggs. Beekeepers often help the bees with this process by providing prefabricated wax plates. These plates give the bees a head start and help them to build faster and with less energy required. They also ensure that the combs are straight, making it easier for the beekeeper to check the health of the hive and harvest the honey. This process is energy intensive and requires a precise temperature inside the hive in order to work. To prevent the hive from getting too cool, the bees huddle close together to generate more heat. To prevent it from getting too hot, guard bees fan the entrance of the hive with their wings to cool the hive. These guard bees also serve as the first line of defense in an emergency, such as when a hornet attacks the hive. Bees sense the vibrations and use them to inform other members of intruders and food sources. The bees pounce on the intruder and try to sting it or scare it away. When a worker bee is ready to forage, she leaves the hive in search of flowers. Honeybees are excellent navigators and locate flowers using a combination of visual cues, such as the bright colours and ultraviolet patterns on petals and scent, which signal the presence of nectar and pollen. Once on the flower, the worker bee collects nectar, a sugary liquid produced by flowers. As for the pollen collection, the bee uses her mouthparts and front legs to collect pollen from the pollen-producing part of the flower. It is a fine, powdery substance from the plant. As the bee moves around the flower to gather nectar, her body, especially the tiny hairs that cover her, accidentally brush against the pollen and cling to her. This passive pollen collection is critical for plant pollination. Some of the pollen carried on her body will be transferred to the next flower she visits, enabling the plant to reproduce. Using her tongue, the bee sips the nectar from the flower and stores it in a special stomach called the honey stomach. This stomach allows the bee to carry nectar back to the hive without digesting it. Nectar serves as the key raw ingredient for honey production. Once a forager bee returns to the hive after collecting nectar and pollen, it begins the process of making honey. The nectar is passed from the forager bee to a hive bee through a process called trophallaxis, in which the nectar is transferred from mouth to mouth. As the nectar is passed from one bee to another, it mixes with enzymes from the bee's salivary glands. These help break down the complex sugars in the nectar into simpler sugars, which prevents spoilage of the honey. This process gets repeated several times until the nectar is digested and thickens. As the moisture content decreases, the nectar turns into a more concentrated form, honey. Once it is ready, the bees store the honey in the cells of the comb. After the honey has reached the right consistency, it gets sealed with a thin layer of wax. This acts as a long-term storage for the colder months when outside nectar is scarce. Similar to the honey, the collected pollen is also stored in the combs. Once a forager bee returns to the hive with pollen, it is packed into combs and mixed with nectar and enzymes. This mixture undergoes a fermentation process and turns into bee bread. Nutrient-rich and stored alongside honey, bee bread is a more easily digestible form of pollen and also provides the necessary protein and vitamins for the growing bees. Whilst honey provides energy, bee bread is crucial for the growth and development of larvae to ensure that the next generation of bees is healthy and strong. The beekeeper is also a treasured member of the hive. He cleans the hive and monitors their well-being and the health of the queen. It is important for the beekeeper to check for varroa mites. These parasites serve as one of the biggest dangers to hives. They attach themselves to the bees and feed on their blood. This weakens the bees and can introduce viruses into the hive. These can seriously endanger the greater colony. Other roles of the beekeeper include providing new comb sheets, checking the honey production, and making sure the hive has enough food for the cold seasons. As the day draws to a close, the bees return home, and as the sun rises, the cycle continues. That is the life in a hive.